Sam Abraham and Meera Nair thought their love was strong enough to conquer family rejection. But what they didn't know was that Evelyn Kurian's envy, Joseph Mathen's greed, and Anania Varghese cold calculations were already turning their marriage into a death trap. Sam Abraham had always been the kind of man who believed in quiet determination. He grew up in a small town where expectations were simple and traditions were followed without question. Yet, when he met Meera Nair, everything in his life changed. Meera was not the kind of woman who blended into the background. She was outspoken, confident, and carried herself with a spirit that refused to bend to anyone else's rules. For Sam, she represented everything he had longed for: freedom, courage, and a sense of belonging that he had never truly felt before. Their paths crossed in the most ordinary way, but the connection was undeniable. Soon, what started as a friendship blossomed into love, and Sam knew he wanted nothing more than to spend his life with her. But love is rarely simple, especially in a world where family honor and community opinion carry more weight than personal happiness. Sam's family was conservative, deeply rooted in tradition. They had already envisioned a bride for him, someone from the same background and faith, someone who would strengthen family ties. Meera, on the other hand, came from a household where pride and reputation mattered above all. Her parents saw her as their jewel, destined for a respectable marriage that would elevate the family's standing. When news of Sam and Meera's relationship reached their homes, it was met not with joy, but with anger. The families accused them of betrayal, of shaming their names, of disregarding everything that had been built over generations. The more their love was resisted, the stronger Sam and Meera felt about their decision. They began meeting in secret, stealing moments together, while knowing that every encounter came with the risk of being discovered. Meera often found herself torn between the weight of her parents' expectations and the sincerity of her feelings for Sam. But Sam's quiet confidence gave her strength. He assured her that they could build a life together, even if the world stood against them. After months of arguments, tears, and endless warnings from relatives, they decided to marry against the wishes of both families. It was a small ceremony, away from the people who mattered most to them. But in that moment, Sam and Meera believed love was enough. Their married life began in a modest apartment, far away from the disapproving eyes of their relatives. Sam worked tirelessly, picking up extra hours to ensure Meera had everything she needed. Meera tried to adjust, but there was always an invisible shadow hanging over their home. The bitterness of being cut off from their family. Friends and neighbors noticed their happiness on the surface, but behind closed doors, moments of tension grew. Meera sometimes missed the comfort of her old life, the security of her parents' home, and the respect she once carried in the community. Sam, though understanding, often felt the pressure of trying to fill that void. He knew Meera had sacrificed everything to be with him, and he carried that weight heavily on his shoulders. Despite their efforts, whispers from the community never stopped. Relatives would send messages filled with insults, reminding them that their love was cursed. Friends who once supported them began to distance themselves, fearing the backlash of association. Sam and Meera often comforted each other, convincing themselves that time would heal the wounds, that their families would one day accept their marriage. Yet, deep down, both felt the sting of rejection. They clung to the hope that love alone could hold them together, unaware of the storm that was slowly gathering around them. Theirs was a union built on defiance, but defiance always comes at a price. Sam believed his only battle was against family pride and outdated customs, but he had no idea that resentment was festering, not just in the hearts of his relatives, but also among those he trusted. While he dreamed of a future filled with peace, the people closest to them were quietly writing a darker story. For now, Sam and Meera thought they had conquered the odds. What they did not know was that the hardest part of their journey had only just begun. Sam had begun to notice small changes in his surroundings, subtle things that he could not explain, but which left him uneasy. Their modest apartment, though filled with the warmth of their new life together, started to feel warm. Sometimes when he returned home late from work, he would catch glimpses of shadows on the staircase or hear the faint echo of hurried footsteps fading away. He tried to dismiss these thoughts as exhaustion, the natural result of his long shifts, but deep within him a sense of being observed lingered. Meera, too, appeared different. Where once she would eagerly greet him at the door, she now seemed distracted, often preoccupied with her phone or lost in thought. Neighbors began whispering about visitors when Sam was at work. One woman passing casually in the corridor mentioned seeing Evelyn Kurian, Meera's cousin, stepping out of the apartment on several afternoons. Evelyn had always been vocal about her disapproval of the marriage. She had argued relentlessly with Meera before the wedding, warning her that marrying Sam would lead to misery. Yet now she appeared regularly, smiling politely in front of Sam, claiming she only wanted to check on her cousin. Her presence unsettled him. There was something in the way Evelyn lingered around the apartment, something watchful in her eyes, as if she was measuring their lives with quiet judgment. It was not only Evelyn who stirred suspicion. Joseph Mathen, Sam's old friend from childhood, also became a frequent visitor. Joseph had always been ambitious, never satisfied with an ordinary life. To Sam he had once been a confidant, someone who understood his struggles. But as Joseph began spending more time with them, Sam noticed a shift. He offered to help with finances, suggested investments, and spoke with a certainty that felt intrusive. Sam could not shake the feeling that Joseph's interest in their lives was not driven by friendship alone. Behind the smiles and helpful gestures, there was a coldness in Joseph's tone, a hint of calculation that unsettled him. Tensions at home began to grow in unexpected ways. Small disagreements with Meera would escalate into heated silences that lasted for days. She seemed restless, dissatisfied with the life they had built. Sam noticed her leaving more often, sometimes without explanation. When he asked, she dismissed his concerns, insisting she only needed space. Yet the distance between them widened with every passing day. Their love, once fierce and determined, began to show cracks. Sam tried to remind her of the sacrifices they had made, of the battles they had fought together, but Meera's eyes betrayed a different story. She seemed torn, caught between loyalty to her husband and an invisible pull that dragged her away from him. Around this time another figure entered their lives, Ananya Varghese. She was introduced through Evelyn during one of her visits, described as a family acquaintance. Ananya carried herself with quiet confidence, her background in medical work lending her an air of knowledge and trust. At first Sam thought little of her, but her presence soon became recurring. She appeared in their conversations, joined their dinners, and sometimes accompanied Meera on outings. To Sam it felt strange, how quickly this woman had become woven into their personal circle. The whispers in the neighborhood continued. Some claimed they had seen Evelyn and Meera arguing outside in hushed voices. Others spoke of Joseph meeting Evelyn late at night. Sam brushed these rumors aside, believing gossip was natural in a community that still judged them harshly for their love marriage. But what unsettled him was the growing feeling that the tension inside his own home was no longer caused by outsiders alone. His once safe haven felt unstable, as though unseen hands were shaping their lives in ways he could not control. Sam carried these doubts silently, never speaking of them openly. His heart still clung to hope, convinced that love could overcome suspicion and unrest. He told himself that the strain would pass, that their lives would eventually return to peace. But beneath the surface, alliances were forming, and secrets were being kept. The very people Sam had welcomed into his home were slowly weaving a web around him. He could sense its threads tightening, though he did not yet realize the danger he was in. To him, it was only tension, only worry. To those around him, it was the beginning of a plan. Sam's health began to falter in ways that startled even him. At first it seemed like nothing more than a stomach bug. He dismissed it as food poisoning, perhaps from a careless meal at work or a spoiled ingredient from the market. But the discomfort did not pass. Instead it grew steadily worse, turning into frequent bouts of nausea, weakness, and unexplained fatigue. He found it increasingly difficult to focus on his job, and his once reliable strength began to slip away. Friends who visited him at home noticed how pale he had become, and how his once vibrant presence was now replaced by a quiet frailty. Doctors were puzzled. Tests came back clean, showing no obvious infection or disease. They prescribed rest, supplements, and adjustments to his diet, but nothing improved his condition. Each visit to the hospital ended with vague reassurances and no real answers. Meera stayed by his side in the early days, gently encouraging him, preparing meals and tending to him. Yet even in her care there was a distance. She often appeared distracted, her eyes clouded with thoughts that she never shared. When Sam reached for her comfort, she gave it reluctantly, as if her mind was elsewhere. What unsettled him further was the behavior of those around him. Joseph Methven began appearing at the hospital with increasing frequency, sitting calmly in waiting rooms, and speaking to doctors with a familiarity that seemed unnecessary. His presence, though outwardly helpful, carried a strange confidence. He reassured Sam that things would be fine, but his tone lacked genuine warmth. It was as if Joseph knew more than he let on. Evelyn Kurian was also ever present, visiting Meera regularly, and often taking charge of small decisions in the household. She spoke with the air of someone who believed she had the right to intervene, her concerns sounding more like control. Ananya Varghese, the quiet acquaintance introduced by Evelyn, became another regular figure in their lives. She seemed to slip into their routines effortlessly, always offering medical advice, always suggesting remedies or bringing unfamiliar pills in neatly folded packets. She claimed they were harmless supplements, intended to help Sam regain his strength. He trusted her, believing her medical background gave her credibility, though something in her calm, calculated manner unsettled him. Still in his weakened state, he did not resist. Weeks turned into months, and Sam's decline became undeniable. His once steady steps grew unbalanced, and his voice lost its firmness. Friends began to whisper among themselves, wondering how a healthy man in his prime could deteriorate so rapidly without a clear cause. Yet through it all, Joseph's composure never wavered, Evelyn's concern never relented, and Ananya's recommendations never ceased. Their presence, instead of bringing comfort, began to feel like a cage surrounding him. Meera, meanwhile, grew cold. The woman who had once defied the world to stand by Sam now seemed distant, her conversations short, her patience thin. She began spending more time outside the house, often with Evelyn and Ananya. When Sam tried to question her absences, she dismissed him with vague explanation. He could sense a wall building between them, one that his weakening body had no strength to break down. The marriage that had once been a symbol of courage and sacrifice was slowly eroding under the weight of unspoken truths. Behind closed doors, rumors swirled about a hidden agenda. Sam had a modest life insurance policy, one that would benefit Meera in the event of his death. There were also whispers about property disputes back in his hometown, assets that could be claimed if Sam was no longer alive. The people who surrounded him, his wife, her cousin, his best friend, and the mysterious Ananya, each seemed to carry motives that went beyond simple concern. Sam, however, remained blind to the extent of the betrayal. He still clung to the hope that his illness was temporary, that his family's rejection and his body's weakness were battles he could overcome. He trusted those closest to him, believing their presence was proof of love. But in reality, each passing day brought him closer to a carefully planned downfall. His suffering was not an accident, nor a natural illness. It was the silent betrayal of those he trusted most, a betrayal that tightened its grip around him with every passing moment. The signs of a deeper conspiracy began to reveal themselves slowly, like fragments of a puzzle scattered across Sam's life. He was too weak to connect them fully, but those around him started noticing patterns that didn't make sense. Neighbors recalled late-night movements around the apartment, unusual visits at odd hours, and hushed conversations that ended abruptly when anyone passed by. One neighbor remembered Joseph carrying unmarked bottles in a bag, slipping quickly into the building without drawing attention. Another spoke of Evelyn and Meera meeting in quiet corners, their faces tense, as if locked in arguments too dangerous to be overheard. To most, these were fleeting observations, unimportant at the time, yet when pieced together they painted the outline of something sinister. Sam's condition, meanwhile, grew more mysterious. His decline did not follow the path of a common illness. Instead, it was uneven, fluctuating between moments of fragile recovery and sudden relapses that left him bedridden for days. Doctors struggled to explain this inconsistency, offering new treatments that never worked. Unbeknownst to them, Ananya Varagesi had already established her role in the background. With her medical knowledge, she understood how to introduce substances that would mimic sickness without immediate detection. Each time she handed Meera a small packet of tablets, she explained them as harmless supplement. Meera, trusting her cousin's friend, followed the instructions, never asking too many questions. Evelyn's role was equally crucial. She had long resented Meera for choosing Sam and rejecting the life her family had envisioned. To Evelyn, the marriage was an insult to their traditions, a constant reminder that Meera had dared to defy them. Her visits to the apartment were not merely out of concern. She came to watch, to ensure that the plan was moving forward. She whispered doubts into Meera's ears, feeding her fears about being trapped in a failing marriage, convincing her that Sam's death could open doors to a better future. Slowly she chipped away at Meera's resolve, pulling her deeper into a web of manipulation. Joseph, on the other hand, was driven by greed. He knew Sam's financial standing better than anyone, having grown up by his side. Though Sam was not wealthy, he held enough assets, life insurance, property shares and savings, that could be exploited. Joseph saw an opportunity not only to secure money, but also to gain influence by aligning himself with those plotting against Sam. He played his part skillfully, appearing as the supportive friend in public, while secretly coordinating with Evelyn and Ananya in private. His calm demeanor at the hospital, his eagerness to handle paperwork, and his quiet presence around Meera, all served to mask his true intentions. The conspiracy was not born overnight. It evolved gradually, strengthened by shared motives and secret alliance. Each of them contributed something essential: Ananya's knowledge, Evelyn's manipulation, Joseph's ambition, and Meera's vulnerability. What had started as resentment against a love marriage turned into a plan that hinged on Sam's slow disappearance. To the outside world, it looked like an unfortunate illness draining him of life. Inside the apartment, it was a carefully controlled process, hidden behind sympathetic words and well-rehearsed concern. Sam, trapped in his own body, sensed only fragments of betrayal. He wondered why Meera no longer held his hand as she once did, why Joseph spoke to doctors with more authority than himself, why Evelyn's eyes lingered on him with something colder than pity. He even noticed how Ananya's visits always coincided with the arrival of new medicines that never seemed to help, but he brushed these thoughts aside, unwilling to believe that those closest to him could wish him harm. His trust, built over years of loyalty and love, blinded him to the danger in front of him. By now the line between love and treachery had blurred beyond recognition. What had begun as a marriage built on courage and defiance had twisted into a silent conspiracy fueled by envy, greed and resentment. While Sam dreamed of a future filled with reconciliation and peace, the people around him dreamed of a future without him. Every pill he swallowed, every visit he welcomed, every reassurance he accepted, brought him closer to the trap they had set. He remained hopeful, but hope could not protect him from what was unfolding in plain sight. The morning Sam was found unconscious, the apartment was unusually quiet. Meera stood frozen at the edge of the bed, staring at her husband's still form. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and his body lifeless to the touch. The neighbors rushed in when they heard her cries, and soon the room filled with confusion and grief. To them it looked like the inevitable end of a long illness that no one had been able to explain. An ambulance was called, but by the time Sam was taken to the hospital, there was nothing the doctors could do. His death certificate listed organ failure as the cause, a vague explanation that satisfied most onlookers. For Meera's family, it was the end of a marriage they had never wanted. For the community, it was another tragic tale of a man cut down by sickness in the prime of his life. The funeral was swift, attended by relatives who had once disowned him, but now came to shed performative tears. Meera wept in silence, her face a mask of grief that few could read. Evelyn stood beside her, offering comfort, her expressions carefully practiced. Joseph hovered near the arrangements, taking on tasks with the air of a man who had lost a brother. Ananya remained in the background, her presence barely noticed by others, her calm demeanor never breaking. To the world, this looked like a family united in sorrow. Beneath the surface, however, it was the quiet celebration of a plan that had succeeded. For weeks after the funeral, life returned to a fragile normal. Sam's absence was explained away as fate, and whispers of bad luck or ancestral curses filled the conversations of distant relatives. Yet, not everyone was convinced. A few of Sam's colleagues, who had watched his decline closely,
found the timing suspicious. They remembered his strength, his determination, and how quickly it had all been stripped away. Some even recalled Joseph's constant presence at the hospital, his insistence on handling paperwork, and the odd way in which Evelyn and Meera seemed to control every decision. These doubts lingered in silence until one colleague decided to raise the concern with authority. The investigation began quietly. Medical records were reviewed, and traces of unusual toxins were discovered in Sam's blood. At first, it was believed to be accidental exposure, but as detectives dug deeper, more connections emerged. They uncovered unusual bank transfers linked to Joseph, small amounts, spread across accounts that suggested hidden payment. They also found prescriptions and unmarked tablets that could be traced back to Ananya, whose access to restricted substances explained the mystery of Sam's fluctuating illness. Evelyn's role surfaced through intercepted phone calls and messages, where she had coordinated with both Joseph and Ananya, her words laced with resentment toward Sam. The most damning evidence, however, came from Meera herself. Records of late-night calls with Evelyn revealed her growing dependence on her cousin's influence. In moments of weakness, she had allowed herself to be persuaded, convinced that Sam's death was a path to freedom from a marriage she had begun to regret. Though she never directly administered poison, her silence and cooperation made her part of the crime. The investigators pieced it all together slowly, building a narrative of betrayal that stunned the community. When arrests were made, the facade of grief collapsed. Evelyn was taken first, her composure shattering under interrogation. Joseph followed, his greed laid bare for all to see. Ananya, calm even in handcuffs, admitted enough to seal her fate. And finally, Meera was confronted with the truth of her choices, forced to face the role she had played in the downfall of the man who had once been her greatest love. The revelation shocked everyone who had once doubted their marriage. What was seen as an unfortunate tragedy became known as a calculated murder. Sam Abraham's life was not taken by illness, but stolen by the hands of those closest to him. The story of his love marriage, once seen as a symbol of courage, ended as a grim reminder of how jealousy, greed, and resentment can twist even the most sacred bonds. The community that had once condemned him for choosing love now mourned him as a victim of betrayal. His story became a cautionary tale, one that proved the most dangerous enemies are not strangers lurking outside, but those who stand beside you, smiling while quietly plotting your end.